Getting juicy. Uh, uh, uh.
I don't know why I've got my fists up.
Well, you got your boxing background in terms of 30-minute hit stuff, right? So
Background, my very professional boxing background. It sounds like no.
exactly. Well, you are a professional more than I am.
Okay, maybe that's the case. I don't
Could be
know.
the case. You never know.
Yeah,
Um, how are you doing this morning?
pretty good. The sun's come back out again. We had it's funny living in the Okanagan, we have these, I'm gonna use the word fierce for some reason. We have very fierce, like short storms.
We got them last night too, actually, surprisingly.
Oh, okay. So we had like a crazy windstorm last night, and the rain just freaking pelts down on
Yep.
the on everything, but it doesn't last very long. And then we'll have these crazy like thunder and lightning storms.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I didn't see last night, but
You didn't see thunder lightning. Me and Sydney saw it out my apartment. We saw it. It was really cool.
fun. No, we don't get a lot of, like I've said to Hero and other people, we hardly get any rain actually. But when
Mm.
it does rain, it's like crazy rain, and for
Hmm.
maybe like an hour, and then it's over. So anyway, it looks like it was all blown over, and now it's beautiful blue sky. So
I
yeah.
know that's always what's beautiful. It's what this like it's like the end of the storm, the calm before the storm, and the calm after the storm.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, and
True.
I don't know why this is what came up on my mind, but because it was just on my newsfeed and stuff, I was looking at this the post about the new seasons of Survivor post during COVID, like how they're coming back to production and things like that, and they always have storms and weather and stuff, and they're actually dropping all the subtitles of like Survivor and then its theme. They're actually just going back to Survivor 41, Survivor 42 without any gimmicks, which is so awesome.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I watched Survivor the first season, maybe the second season, when it was
yeah,
like
I know.
TV was a new thing.
Yes.
Richard Hatch won the first Survivor.
Yes, yes. I've reached out to him because he's got a small following, and I was really hoping he'd reach out, but nope.
Well, we'll see. We'll try him again.
Down the hatch.
Hey, drink it down the hatch, Richard Hatch.
Exactly. Well, I mean, as far as, weathering the storm, I think that's actually a really great kind of tangent into our guest today. Our guest is someone that has been a huge ally, support, and really a miracle worker in weathering the storm that is my digestive system, my guts, and my overall health and sanity. Whether if it's supplements, if it's modifying medications, if it's helping to understand how to eat healthier for my body, even though I was already health conscious from when a late teenager. And so this man is by the name of Dr. Jason Marr, who is the owner of his own integrative medicine clinic called Evoke Integrative Medicine. But it also has evolved into him being a coach, a professional coach, and helping with people's performance and being able to be really established in their health and their wellness as a whole, not just their diet, but how they show up in their life and how they take action in what they wish to be doing. He has been my naturopath. I know we had a past episode with Rachel. We had your naturopath, Dr. Brittany Jeffries, on, and now we had the idea to have my naturopath on.
Yeah.
And Jay Marr is just such a handsome, gentle teddy bear of a human being that I was referred to from an old friend of mine from when I used to work at Y Yoga downtown Flow, or formerly Flow Wellness. And Jason was our in-house resident naturopathic doctor. And so my friend Kezia was saying, you should go see him, go see him, go see him. So sure enough, we had really good discounts on wellness services when we were employed. And so I saw Jay for a consultation. And then, from that, it developed into me getting acupuncture and intramuscular stimulation, where they put the needle
Yeah.
in a shallow way, and they kind of jiggle it around to release deep seated muscle tension. And then he got me into some food and nutritional stuff, which I couldn't really stick to at the time.
Well, and
And
it's interesting because sorry to interrupt, but I know because he's hopping on any second here, but it's interesting because you have, and we'll talk to him about this, like you don't really go to a Western medicine doctor, really. You just go to him.
I only go to him. He prescribes my prescriptions because naturopaths, depending on their background, can prescribe Western medicine. So I don't actually have a designated medical doctor. But whoever was my pediatric family doctor, like that actually helped deliver me at my birth, he's still alive, but he's retired. You know,
Yeah.
and it would be weird to go into a children's doctor's office when you're 30. You're
You
at.
you need to find a new GP, but
Well, for now, I kind of got the best of both worlds. And so, what's great, I know we talked about this with Brittany, is that Jay really believes in understanding the Western medicine background to enough of an extent to also bridge it over to the Eastern medicine, which is what he's passionate about and what he's educated in primarily. What's really great about Jay as well, though, is that he really helped me survive and conquer stage 2 adrenal fatigue, which essentially could have been developed into stage 3 and 4, which basically means to like adrenal failure or kidney disease or kidney failure. And it was getting to that point where I had a leaky gut syndrome and I couldn't digest anything whatsoever. Like I literally, if I drank or if I had like even like frozen yogurt when I still ate dairy, um, it got to the point where I was eating it every day and I was depressed as fuck. And I was so done with my job and I felt so miserable. And I was in the process of trying to finish my teacher training and things like that. And I remember hurling over the desk after an 8.5 hour shift trying to cash out. And I felt like I had missiles being shot at my organs. That it was so visceral. And that's when I went to Jay and said, okay, what do I do? And he said, you remember how I gave you these subtle warnings to a couple years ago? Well, now you got to fucking do it.
yeah.
Because if you don't, this is what's going to continue to happen.
Wow.
So I did a 1 month elimination diet cleanse, and I will let Jay give his perspective about that because he'll have a lot more to talk about from there.
Absolutely. Hi, Jason. How are you?
Going on? How are you guys? Hi, Rachel. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, really good. We were just Jason. Hiiro was just now I've got a brother-in-law named Jason, so I'm just gonna call everyone Jason. Hiiro
Good
was
name.
yeah, it's a great name. Hiiro was just giving you a lovely intro and just talking about how much you've helped him and basically how if it wasn't for you, like he might have gone into organ failure, like for not being so dramatic, but really, like you've basically really helped this boy. I still call you.
When he met me, for sure, definitely. I didn't have a full beard, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to say, Hiiro and I have known each other for a long time. So, yeah.
It's been a decade. It's actually been
Yeah.
over 10 years now, which is amazing. Yeah. So Jay,
That's
welcome to our offices or our living rooms, I guess you could say. Are you at the office right now? It looks like you're at home based on the background.
Yeah, I actually figured I'd stay home and do all my meetings from home today because I can. I've got some appointments around town later today anyway. So
There you go. So first of all, welcome to our podcast. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come in and chat with us. It's really great. You even said you were interested when I had to follow up with you a little while ago. So that was really sweet. Gave you a little intro, just kind of explain a little bit about how both you and me met, some of the things you've helped me with, and then also kind of cross-reference Rachel's naturopath, who we had on a little while back, who has some similar actual intentions and kind of focuses on what you focus on in terms of helping with the general body and people's health. And so we thought it would be really neat to have two different viewpoints of a certain practice that is very common in our society and how people are really impacted by the benefits of what they provide from that service. And clearly from how I've managed to thrive and say maintaining in my health, it's definitely been a result of your guidance and then paired with the discipline that goes with it. So I mentioned about you being the owner of Evoke, how we met at Y Yoga. I didn't mention that Jay was also the wellness manager or director for Chopra Yoga, which I also taught at for about 1.5 years. And then Jay chose to start his own clinic in downtown Vancouver. But you're currently living in Coquitlam or in Port Coquitlam? I can't recall.
Yeah, I live in Coquitlam now. We're just up the hill from Port Moody, but yeah, Tri Cities. Yeah, we've been out here for a couple of years now.
Yeah. And how's that been?
Oh, I love it. I mean, I think obviously with the pandemic, it's kind of highlighted space. And as you know, Hero, I've got two young ones, so having some space to romp around. And the other big thing for us is just we have family in the area. So my wife grew up in this area and everything. So we're just minutes away, minute or two drive away from all four of her siblings and her parents who
Oh
live nearby.
my. Oh, that's so
Yeah,
nice. It's
Great.
even
So
they've,
nice. I was
they've
gonna say,
all got too. So all the cousins can get together. I mean, obviously not over the last year and a half or so as much, but
yes.
the intention.
But it's great when you need a break, you need an eject button. It's like, nope, you're going over here. We'll see you in 3 hours.
Exactly. Yeah. As I said, it's been a little frustrating. We haven't been able to really do that over the last year and a bit. But yeah,
yeah.
well,
Exactly. I guess you've really had to really fully step into being independent parents.
that's too. Yeah, as we all have.
I'm curious. So I'm curious. I'm gonna just jump right in there, jump right into the deep
Good.
end.
I'm excited. Let's do it.
So how did you get involved in what you do right now? And so do I call you like your designation? You're a naturopathic doctor? Yes.
Naturopathic doctor. I also underwent, in the last couple of years anyway, some additional certification in organizational coaching. So it's sort of like personal life coaching, but also taking that into the workplace and coaching and working with organizations and executive groups. So for me, I blend coaching with my doctoring with healthcare and medicine as well. But yeah, I mean, naturopathic medicine for me was, I don't have the as much of the maybe like hardcore personal health challenge and story that a lot of my colleagues have. I think when you hear a lot of naturopathic doctors, they come into the profession because they had a major health issue when they were younger, and
Mhm.
naturopathic medicine was the resource that really helped them overcome or deal with the outcomes of everything that happened to them. And I wouldn't say that I have as powerful a story there, but for me, I kind of always knew I would get involved in healthcare right from the beginning of undergrad and even the end of high school. And
Oh wow.
um, I thought that would be chiropractic, physiotherapy, medicine. But I was writing my applications for conventional medical schools, and it was pretty clear to me by the end of those applications that that wasn't really the style of medicine that I thought of when I thought of what it was going to be like to be a doctor. And so the opportunity to spend more time with people and develop those relationships and work with them longer term and see them achieve positive goals, not just like living in fear of their disorder or their disease or their diagnosis and overcoming challenges is one thing, but where do we go from there? So for me, it's always been about more proactive health than even preventive health. And so I get a kick out of people being the best that they can be and going on and doing wild and wonderful, crazy things that change our world. So naturopathic medicine offered the best opportunity for me to do that.
I
Very
love
well said. Very well said.
it is very well said. And also just what you said about preventative rather than sorry, what it
Proactive as opposed to preventative.
And
Yeah.
now you're giving me my platform, though, Rachel and Hero. That's a huge thing for me. Like, and I think the pandemic really highlights that, right? We live in a fear-based world. Like, whether not, and I honestly, I don't really want to get into COVID and the pandemic and vaccines and all that kind of thing. But there's so much fear and we live by that, and that's a normal human biological process to be fearful and to be scared. That's what preserves our lives in many
Mm-hmm.
cases, right? That's what it's for.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that as humans, there's this opportunity for us to be thinking not just what can I do now to stop bad things from happening. Am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
You
I
can do
just
whatever the
realized.
fuck you want.
And all right, cool. Yeah, because I often say, like, we live in fear of shitty things happening to us all the time. And instead of taking action now to prevent shitty things from happening,
Yeah.
we can also be taking action now to create positive outcomes. What is it that I actually want out of my life? What is it that I want right now? What do I want to be able to do? And those are the things that should be motivating for us as well, or at least contribute to our motivations as much as the fear side of things.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yep. We do this all the time. We both have a common, and we were like, okay, no, you go, no, you go. It can't be too Canadian, you know. But no, as you said, in terms of being proactive health, in terms of helping people take choices where they can look over their fear and their anxieties, which is so thematic in terms of our podcast and what me and Rachel live with every day. And that's something that I also attribute to your skill set as well. It's not just knowing about health knowledge, but how to understand the brain of how someone is, and how your gut is your second brain, but your brain is your first brain. And being able to combine the emotional, physical, and spiritual into that, I think also lends a hand with the Chinese principles that come into naturopathic medicine or traditional Chinese medicine. Because Rachel was also mentioning that, or I was mentioning that, because of some naturopathic doctors' backgrounds, maybe not all, but some, they also cross over into Western medicine, and therefore can actually be a language that is not a barrier, but actually a crossover to help clients understand what their needs are and how to meet them halfway or meet them more than halfway, and then still interject what your skill set is, what your knowledge base is into their wellness, right? Because I'm sure there can be a barrier to people today even that might be like, I'm not into naturopathic medicine, I'm not into that Eastern stuff, from people that might
Yeah.
be our ages, I could imagine.
So interesting you actually bring that up here. It's perfect because this week is actually Naturopathic Medicine Awareness Week across the country. Yeah, I'm saving it for Friday night. But my last post this week for Naturopathic Medicine Week is something I've been meaning to do for a while, to get public on modernizing the naturopathic principles. In naturopathic medicine, we talk a lot about the old school principles of medicine and I guess health in general, but they're written literally, half of them are basically still Latin. We talk about the vis medicatrix naturae, and 100 years ago that was translated to the healing power of nature. But when you hear those words, like that doesn't really resonate with a lot of people. And for those people
Yeah.
who that resonate with, they're already patients of naturopathic doctors. They get it. That's those are the early adopters, the easy adopters in the market. But
Yeah.
you know, and I think this is a big role that I want to play, is, like you said, bridging the gap for people who may have resistance or a preconception of what naturopathic medicine is or could be for them. Those are the people that I actually tend to do best with, is people who aren't really sure about more holistic, complementary, I hate the word alternative medicines, but
Yeah.
integrative therapies and philosophies, and being able to bridge that gap for those people to bring them a slightly different perspective. But we have to change the vocabulary and the way that we talk about naturopathic medicine if we're going to reach more people. Because right now, the way that the tenets or the principles are written in naturopathic medicine sounds like you're in the 1800s still.
Right.
That's kind
Yeah.
of the
So how old is naturopathic medicine then? I mean, I guess that is that like
you
a can of worms because it comes from different countries and like there's just different modalities really within that realm of
can,
naturopathic medicine. Yeah.
I mean, naturopathic medicine, you could argue, is the oldest form of medicine. I mean,
Right.
that's what naturopathic medicine does, for better and for worse, is it stays really true to original philosophies and principles of healthcare and medicine. When we talk about, well, I mean, one of the things that I'll talk about this week is that, the word doctor actually comes from the Latin word docere, and docere means to teach or to coach. It doesn't mean to heal, cure, or to walk on water and perform miracles. So, it actually really irks me when any doctor talks about healing other people, because you don't heal anybody as a doctor or any other healthcare practitioner or profession. People heal themselves. Sometimes we just need a guide to give us the information and the understanding of how to do that, and
Yeah.
why things are. And
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely. You can't. Can you hear my husband in the background?
Yes, we can. I can.
I just told him that we. What a bum. Adriana, we can hear you.
So funny.
This is how candid we are in our podcast. That's what happens when you work from home, right?
Yeah.
Happens.
it's the pandemic. Hey, it could be worse. You could be walking around in your underwear with the video on by accident.
Oh my God. And I know we're totally getting off tangent, but
Oh, I would happily do that. Trust me.
Any opportunity for you to show off your socks, right, Hiiro?
Oh, more than that, but yes.
Sorry, yeah, about that. I'm gonna get on him after this. Yeah, no, I'm kind of the mindset that I still believe that I guess that we need, like, I have my GP, and I go to my GP for certain things, and I go to my naturopath for other things. Like, I still kind of in the mindset that, like, you need Western medicine should come into play in certain aspects. But it's interesting because Hiiro doesn't have a GP and he only sees you, which I think is really, like, quite modern, quote unquote. So I don't really know where I'm going with that. It's more just an interesting observation. And actually, where I'm going with that, and maybe this will not get into an argument, but quite a conversation, is that I still find that my naturopathic doctor and my GP, I love my GP, but they're still butting heads. And it's
Mhm.
frustrating coming from the patient who just sometimes doesn't know who to believe.
Mm.
Yep.
And that's,
Yeah.
like, I wish that everyone can get on the same page in a way and be like, okay, well, so-and-so is great for this, but I'm okay with this, and let's just work together. But I still,
Yeah.
that's not happening. It's,
Like I said, I mean, I really don't like the term alternative medicine. I don't think that there are alternative medicines. It's just medicine, right? And
Mhm.
many people have slightly different values or principles or belief systems or training, and different things that they bring to the table that are their strengths, right? There are certain things that I'm not going to be great at as a doctor for certain people. And for me, it's more about finding the right match between patient and doctor to have a trusting relationship where you can have those discussions. So there's certainly diversity, throughout all different types of doctors. I will take this opportunity, though, to point out that naturopathic doctors, at least in BC, as regulated in British Columbia here in Canada, are licensed as primary care physicians, and we're trained as primary care physicians. So what that means is that we are trained just like your family doctor to be able to recognize when things are not normal and where and how to refer out, when and where possible. That's one of our primary responsibilities as a licensed healthcare practitioner and primary care physician in BC. We're actually not allowed across the country, in most other provinces. We're not allowed to say the term primary care physician or even naturopathic physician. In BC,
oh,
we have the most progressive licensure and regulation across the country. And
wow.
there's varying levels of regulation in the States too.
Mhm.
But yeah, in BC, I can act as your primary care physician. I can prescribe almost every medication that your GP can, with a couple of exceptions. Um, we've got great pharmacy access. One of
Mhm.
the big things that we don't have as good access to is laboratory rights. So
Mm.
it's hard for us to access labs right now in BC. But again, if you compare that across the rest of the country, we've got the best scope of practice. And I think even though you've had some experience with this, maybe to the alternative, Rachel, I think that it is a much more progressive province in terms of healthcare practitioners in general working together. And the last thing that I'll add, which I bet Hiiro is like it's on the edge of his tongue, is that my wife is a conventional medical doctor. She's a pediatric oncologist at Children's Hospitals. So, when you're talking about butting heads, we make that work every day. So,
Mhm.
Wow.
and I can tell you that there are multiple naturopathic doctor, conventional medical doctor couples across the country. We belong to a fairly select club, and we pretty much know each other really well. But there's another number of them actually here in BC as well, MD/ND couples.
Mm. Interesting. I love that you said it was sitting on the tongue because I actually kind of forgot about that. So I'm glad you mentioned it. But also, what I will take that back to is that one reason why I confide and trust so much in Jay, and I'm fine to talk about confidential stuff on here because it's you, Rachel, and whatever. We did the same with Brittany. But I mean, in terms of what I've had to go through and my introduction to Jay, which is I kind of said to Rachel how I was introduced to, is kind of funny, kind of as I was like, oh yeah, I'll go check it out. Whatever. Okay, fine. Because, the person that referred me was like, you got to go, almost peer pressuring me. But then, sure enough, 10 years later, it's very important for me to be able, as Jay talked about, having a trusting relationship with whoever it is that's handling parts of my health that I need guidance with, but
Mhm.
also because of things in history and things I've been through as well. I'm not just going to walk into any office if it's something that's severe, that's acute to what I need to work on chronically, like long term. I'm just not going to. So when he also mentioned about his wife being in oncology and was Zach being in BC Children's Hospital and passing of leukemia, I mean, even if it's indirect, that alone builds a trust and an understanding of the severity of what could be affected on the patient's mental health after living with grief and bereavement, and then also the effects of your gut and digestion, and then chronic mental health and severe anxiety disorders that are also challenging how to regulate everything as a whole. So coming into that as a new patient, automatically I was just like, oh, okay, you're cute, you're not intimidating, and you actually are very sincere in wanting to genuinely help me. So I can let my guard down and let you into my life and then let you see what you want to do with it. And then let alone, as I mentioned in my intro before you popped on, Jay, like you've seen the growth and development, not just in my body, but also in my awareness of how to provide for myself and require that to
Mhm.
better my adulthood. And what I also find interesting, Rachel, is that I didn't remember this, I didn't realize this, but Jay also said that when I started being a client of Jay's, Jay had also only been practicing into his second year as a naturopathic doctor. So I also found that quite interesting too. And so to kind of have that growth between patient and doctor is pretty neat because you get to build a bond that may be not better or worse, but just different with someone that's, oh yeah, you're part of my beginning steps to learning this trade, this craft, and you're seeing me grow as I help you grow. It's different.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. It's interesting that you said a few things there, and I want to comment on the fact that I think that these days, especially these days with the pandemic, that I'm noticing for myself, I'm needing a practitioner or somebody to take care of the connection between my mind and my body, not just the physical symptoms. I mean, I've always dealt with mental health challenges, but even more than ever. And to have someone, I find that a naturopathic doctor or somebody like yourself is just more in tune with that connection, perhaps, or just more personable, and will sit down and actually really dive deeper into that connection. So I don't know if you can speak to that, about that, the whole connection between the mind and the body, but I feel like that's more than ever. I feel like that's something that people are recognizing.
Yeah, I think, what the driving force is for a lot of people who come into my office is that, whether they have not been successful in addressing their health issues with other people, or whether it's a new thing and it's more of a
Mm-hmm.
first meeting or first shot at dealing with something. I think what people these days are really realizing that they want and need in healthcare is trust. But I think by trust, I mean like clarity and confidence that the plan and the recommendations that they're getting are going to be tailored to them as an individual, right? Like I think
Yes.
we are in a time in history where I think more than ever, in my opinion, we are very focused on recognizing that and respecting that we are all individual and unique people, and respecting that that's okay. But we also can't treat people from a medical standpoint as a generalized vessel that is to be healed, right? We all
Yes.
have contexts, and I don't think that you can really work with someone in a partnership to develop or to figure out what the best next step is for that person unless you've got some level of trust and rapport. So
Oh yeah.
that's, I think, the core foundation of certainly a naturopathic relationship, and that's why it takes more time for us to develop those treatment plans and to work with you. It's not a 7.5 minute visit. On average, you go to your GP, you get 7.5 minutes. That's literally the provincial average. 7.5 minutes for one concern, also. And that's not the doctor's fault, by the way. That's entirely the system's fault,
Yeah.
because those are essentially the quotas that they are required to achieve. But as a naturopathic doctor, I get to spend usually a full hour with that person in the first visit, and then half an hour, 45 minutes or more in follow-up sessions. So there's opportunity to build trust and to explain things,
Yeah.
and for the patient to understand, okay, this is why we are doing these things. Here are my recommendations, but now I also understand why that's important, and what the treatment plan is seeking to overcome, or to do from a process standpoint. And when you understand those things, you're much more likely to actually sustain the plan, like you're actually going to do it. You're going to stay more
Yeah.
consistent, be more accountable to it. But when you're just told do this and there's no other explanation, it's like screw you. I don't really want to do that. It doesn't sound that important. Right?
Well, and you just said the word plan, which is nice because I think that a lot of, and I actually do really like my GP because he does really, he actually does spend a lot more time with me because he knows yeah, we've actually built quite a good relationship. But I do find that with a lot of GPs, it's like, okay, people expect like a quick fix and there's not really a long-term plan necessarily, which I think that maybe there's a misconception perhaps that if someone goes to a naturopath, they're like, well, it didn't really help me because maybe they're expecting, because it is a plan, it's a relationship, it's a plan, and it's a long-term like thing of positive, you know, I don't know if you find that, but
Yeah. And I think there's two parts to it though too, right? Like, and this is probably coming from my coaching side of things, but like people expect results, like, and that's not an unreasonable request, even in medicine and in healthcare. And people are entitled to those results. And I mean, as doctors, we're not allowed to, and nor can we ever guarantee that the results are going to be there. But I always think of, what are the priorities right now, and how can I develop this relationship further? And so, and I mean, I bring that right to the forefront, and verbally, I will talk to my patients about this and say, look, I want to show you that we can achieve some results with these values and principles and beliefs, and using this kind of medicine and this kind of approach.
yeah,
So here are some of the priorities that you outlined. What are the most important things? Let's target our initial treatment recommendations to that thing. But what you have to understand is if we're going to get at all these other things, then we also need to continue to peel back the layers. It's not just one and done, it's one thing at a time, and there's always a next step. So it is
exactly.
ideally a long relationship, even if we're targeting specific concerns in the short term.
Well, and you make a point with that, and because I'm giving consent to speak about my journey and my story, and Rachel knows all of it, anyways. But again, you can see the layers that have come through beginning a practice with you, and how it started out with, okay, let's just give you some needles. Let's make sure you don't faint when I show you a needle. Okay, good. We're going to use needles on you. Great. And then, hey, diet. Great. Okay. Real, and then again, 2 years later, remember that time when I told you this? Yeah, well, now you better fucking do it, because otherwise, this is what's probably going to happen to you. Though I can't guarantee it, it probably will. So you better start doing this now. Fast forward
Pretty
2 years
sure I
later. No, but you definitely were like, Hiiro, you need to do this now. Like, I'm not telling you to do it, but I'm telling you, like, these are the things that could happen if you continue going this way. So here's a plan to help you progress in a way that can actually reverse what you're feeling and help you actually get on a track that's going to be good for you long term.
what's important about that, Hero, is also like if we hadn't had that history and developed that rapport,
Yep.
I can't do that to everybody, right? Like
God, no.
there's a time and a place to be more assertive or aggressive, not
Mhm.
aggressive, but assertive with laying out the tough love.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I don't think it's appropriate as a medical practitioner to be bringing that to the table in your first visit, right? I mean, there's a
Right.
time
No.
and a place for that. Like
No.
if someone in danger of dying or hurting themselves or others, then yeah, that's something that we have to do. That's part of our responsibility as doctors.
Yeah.
But to get the most out of you and to maximize your commitment to yourself, sometimes that's what we need to hear, but it's got to be done right and at the right time.
Yeah, and then for those that are listening to this as well, the follow up on what Jay just said, I had been seeing Jay probably every week, every couple weeks, but very regularly for 2 years. So there was a really strong bond, which is what he's touching on. So you wouldn't experience this in the first visit. Absolutely, you wouldn't at all. Like, why? How would you go back to any kind of practitioner if that's your experience? But even in terms of that, figuring those things out, and then me busting my knee out and being like, hey, I actually have someone that I can rely on for me to help recover my knee or whatever I did to injure this part of my body. The
Mhm.
beauty of naturopathic medicine, from my experience as a patient, is the depth and the diversity that it can provide for your overall health and wellness. If it's a physical thing, if it's a non-physical thing, if it's a chronic condition that you're living with, it can all be addressed in so many ways, from supplements to diet to coaching. And I'm curious to actually hear about, and you can deflect or just say no, thank you, next. Is that a lot of people are either into homeopathy or they are not so into it. I kind of hear a lot of um, polarizing opinions about it, and that is something that I know in the past that we've done or that you might have helped with other people. I'm curious to hear a little insight about that. What your thoughts are in it currently in your practice, and what are your thoughts on others' views on it too?
Yeah. Um, yeah, homeopathy is not a big part of my practice, never has been.
Yeah.
At risk of opening up a can of worms. I mean, I come from an evidence-based, science-based background. Homeopathy is really difficult to explain and to study under the our current understanding of how we address scientific progress. That's probably the nicest way I can say it.
Yeah.
I have also, on the flip side, seen homeopathy do some weird, crazy, miraculous, amazing shit.
Yeah.
And when remedies slap me in the face and it's really obvious, like, oh, this is a really good homeopathic intake. This is a great homeopathic clue. There's clearly we call them polycrests, a polycrest remedy that is a great starting point. I'm not going to ignore that. Homeopathy is a core part of naturopathic medicine in our training, particularly in Canada. But at the same time, there's also, from my perspective as a business person, as an entrepreneur, it's also a business decision where most of the people that I tend to attract into my practice and that I tend to work best with, they don't understand homeopathy, and it's difficult for them to understand that that's not something they're looking for as a service. So, over the years, it's become less and less part of my practice, but I certainly won't discount the outcomes that I've seen. But I have with the platform that I have and the way that I approach medicine and the cases that I work on and the people that I work with,
Yeah.
not the most effective tool because my patients in most cases won't trust it. And
Right.
there's also, like, whether it's homeopathy or whether there's lots of other fad treatments, especially in naturopathic medicine, like IV therapies and
Mhm.
prolotherapies and other injections and all of these other weird and wonderful things that we think of as sometimes more alternative medicines.
Yes.
Like, I'm really into light, cold laser, basically, so low intensity light therapy, a low level light therapy for healing, particularly for injuries.
Mhm.
But I think the big thing for me is that the core, if you don't have the core built underneath your building, diet, lifestyle,
Mm,
those other things aren't going to matter as much. And you
okay.
can treat a disease or disorder or symptom or a sign with a medication or a homeopathic or a supplement or an herb. But if you're just treating the symptom, then you're not really doing naturopathic medicine. Because
Mhm.
naturopathic medicine is about understanding and figuring out, identifying and understanding where that symptom or sign came from, why you got to where you're at, and intervening at that process level. So constantly getting further and further upstream, I like to say, to
Yeah.
find those more elegant solutions for health.
I love the process that you're talking about, how you go about with your practice, because on the flip side, like we talk about how, in Western medicine, a doctor it might be so easy for them just to prescribe and just try to fix the symptom, right? Instead of getting down deeper layers. But I have to say, I have been to naturopathic doctors. I'm just gonna say it. Like you probably know what I'm gonna say, but like where they just slap a supplement and it's like the first, it's just like, okay, I walk out of there. I've spent $200-300 on the first visit. And I'm like, really? Like, so there's a fine line, I think, with both worlds. And it sounds you're kind of nodding your head like I think we all know that there are people in both sides that probably do that. So I don't know. Like, so I guess then that's where I think where people's skepticism comes about because they hear
Yeah,
those stories.
I'm
Yeah.
not afraid to stand up and to call out my colleagues who are more reactive like that. Yes, you can treat a lot of things that we treat with conventional medicine, and from a drug standpoint, there are in many cases effective, safe therapies from, let's say, an herbal or a nutritional or orthomolecular standpoint. Orthomolecular medicine being like high dose nutrients.
Right.
But if you are just treating the symptom and or blocking a process without getting deeper into that, without peeling back the layers of the onion, I love Shrek. Then you're not doing naturopathic medicine, and I am not afraid to call out naturopathic doctors, but other medical practitioners as well, who think that they are or say that they are practicing more holistically, but aren't at least searching for like consistently asking the question why. We're kind of getting naturopathic philosophies again, but like identifying and treating the underlying cause, like the way that I would modernize that I'll be talking about this Friday
Yeah.
is it's about asking the question why and never
Yeah.
stop that question process. Okay, you've got a rash on your skin. What's the underlying process there? It's inflammation. Awesome. Let's block the inflammation. That's not a bad. That deals with the problem,
Yeah.
but where's the inflammation coming from? And if you block that inflammation from being cleared from the body at that point, where does that inflammation then come out? Is it going to be repressed? Is it coming out in other ways? And the best example for that is eczema. Eczema, especially eczema in young kids and in infants, you block that with, let's say, a corticosteroid. You prevent that inflammation from clearing itself through the skin. And so essentially, you're retaining all of that inflammation. What often happens is the kids develop asthma because if the skin isn't, if you're not getting things out through your urine and your stool, the major routes of elimination, your skin's the next biggest detox
Mm,
organ. So
mm.
skin is the obvious way for that. There's those byproducts of inflammation to come out. And if you block that from the skin and it's still not getting out in any other way, really the only other way for you to get stuff out of your body is through your lungs. And
Yeah.
it's not effective. We're not really effective at clearing all that stuff through our lungs, but that's why people, young kids, part of the reason why they develop asthma with eczema and allergies.
Interesting.
Hmm.
I
Fascinating.
You just said something else that just triggered something that I thought of was about questioning things. And we're called the Getting Juicy podcast for a reason, like a Jew. And Jews, I'm just kidding, Jews are known for like questioning things all the time. Like that's
At
just,
least 4 times.
Yeah.
but something else is, and something you talk about a lot, I think, and I was looking at your blog about resilience. I saw that word resilience a lot. And the Jewish people are known for being resilient from all the things, all the shit we've had to go through and blah, blah, blah. So speaking of that resilience, where does that come into play? Like where did you get, what interested you about that word, about that realm of resilience? I'm curious.
Resilience. Resilience is that's literally like my platform that I've, over 14, 15 years of practice now finally figured out like this is my mission and my reason for becoming a naturopathic doctor and for everything I do now. So that's resilience is my platform, period. But
Awesome.
it's really it's a personal resilience perspective and recognizing that in order to be the best that you can possibly be, you've got to have a baseline level of resilience that allows you to thrive through shit, basically. And so if you are consistently thinking about how can I put myself in the best position to thrive through hardships, and the pandemic has obviously highlighted all of this and kind of stole some of my thunder from the everyone's using the word resilience now and it's really pissing me off, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's such an important message. Yeah, so resilience kind of started honestly, and I don't know if I've ever said this publicly before, but when I was a teenager, I was big into gaming, and I haven't picked up a controller or anything like that lately. I kind of wish I had with all of this e-gaming going on these days. I love working with e-game with e-athletes these days. But yeah, so resilience was like I am resilient with a Z. That was my gaming handle for the longest time, and
Uh,
with first person shooters, you get on, you get online, you die, you come back, you
mhm.
respawn, and you get better and you improve every time. So for me, it kind of made sense as a
Hmm.
cool, trying to be cool teenager. That kind of came full circle when I started thinking about like what I thought I was best suited to be working, like to focus on with the people that I work with. And so a lot of people who come into my office are struggling to balance the stress or the pace of life, the churn, as we often talk about. That might be balancing. Like I work with a lot of new dads, new parents in particular, who are also business owners or corporate execs and stuff like that. And a lot of people feel like you're not able to be the best parent and partner that you can be, and be the best leader at work at the same time, or to build your business or to build your practice in the best way. And it feels like you're always having to sacrifice one or the other. You can't do it all at once. And so to get the most out of your brain and your body and to do all the things that you want to do and to be the best version of yourself in all the realms, that has to start with being resilient to the various stresses that come at us every day. So
Hmm.
that's sort of my mission, is that people need to be thinking about, how do I build personal resilience so that I can weather the shit storms that are coming, and then to thrive coming out of that. And the pandemic again is such a huge opportunity for us all to take that challenge on. And we've done
Absolutely.
really well through that. I mean, humans are resilient by nature. It's one of the reasons why we've done so much, for better and for worse, with our Earth, and been here for so long. But I think that there's further work to be done.
I love that. And then speaking of genetically, do you I don't know, I thought Hero, when I talked about before you popped on, or when you accepted to be on the podcast, about genetics and like just how they play a part in our physiology and how that's a thing. Do you believe there are certain genetic components that you can't change? Like,
Yeah, I mean, we're always going to be talking about epigenetics and
yeah,
how, especially major traumas, can
yes,
change the expression of our genes. I think for me, where I stand on the genetic side of things, and functional genetics is a big part of my practice, where we look at how each of us is so different at the DNA level. Every one of us has tiny little, they're technically mutations, they're errors in our DNA that become
yeah,
pervasive throughout our body. And most of those are inherited from our parents.
Hmm.
Um, but those tiny little differences, we call them SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNPs. Those SNPs can make, when there are these SNPs or these errors in genes at a specific spot in our DNA,
Hmm.
that can affect the function often of an enzyme, for instance.
mhm,
So one of the easiest examples is there's a gene called BCMO1. It has to do with converting beta carotene to vitamin A in the body. So in our foods, we consume mostly beta carotene. It's sort of an orange red vitamin. So think oranges in particular, and carrots.
yeah,
A ton of beta carotene from carrots. But in order for that to actually be used in the body for maintaining and developing the eyes, or the skin and our immune system, vitamin A is very important for mucosal immunity as well. So fighting off bacteria and viruses, actually.
mhm,
Uh, Appropriate to mention that in this day and age. For young boys, it's about the development of the testicles as well. Really
yeah,
important vitamin. Obviously, that's why it's called a vitamin. It's a vital mineral to our body. But if you don't get enough beta carotene to make enough vitamin A, then you're going to have more challenges with your health in those areas, so skin and immune system especially. The
Hmm.
people
hmm,
who have a crappy version of the BCMO1 gene due to a small little error there, those people are not going to convert beta carotene to vitamin A at the same rate. So those people need to eat more orange and red foods than the next
okay,
person. That is a bigger issue for them than the next person.
Huh.
So that's just one example amongst hundreds of data that we have these days over the last 10 years sort of figured out, that that's how we can define precision or personalized medicine. That's how we develop personalized medical plans, is understanding this is how your body is best built to function, literally right down to like the instruction manual level in your DNA.
yeah,
Hmm.
So now we then look at your blood work and your current context of your life to see what the most appropriate priorities are, from a
Hmm.
diet and lifestyle. Tons of information that we can get from our functional genetics, not just around diet, but how we should be exercising, or how we are likely to get the best outcomes for exercise. How we're going to respond to certain medications is a big area.
Hmm.
Um,
right.
Pharmacogenetics. So that's a big area that a lot of conventional medical doctors are using functional genetics for, which is super important too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, for me, that's how I really personalize or individualize, or to use a more common modern term, I guess it's how we develop like bespoke medical plans for people.
Are there type of like genetic blood tests you can take in that sense, or is that not a thing?
Yeah, There are tons of different private labs that do genetic tests. I mean, you've
Yeah.
probably heard of the big players in the States that are very public companies. I'm not going to name them because I don't have to. But those are big ones that are very common, and you can get that kind of data if you take the raw data from those companies and what they do. But most genetic testing these days is either a cheek swab or it's a spit test. And in both cases, all we're looking for is a single cheek cell that we can analyze with some pretty advanced tech.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's completely painless. It's easier to do a DNA test than it is to do all your blood tests and all these other
Yeah.
advanced.
Huh.
I might be
Yeah.
interested in that. That is, yeah, it's, yeah, you definitely have piqued my interest on a few levels there for sure. But like, and I hear when I've talked about a few times on the podcast about intergenerational trauma when it comes to mostly mental health, though. So, and I know we've talked a lot about, maybe fixing is the wrong word, but getting down to the crux of like certain symptoms. But with mental health, is that part of your practice as well? Like talking about anxiety and depression and those
Yeah,
types of
I
things?
think there are basically the top three reasons. Like when people come into my practice, there's an intake form, and one of the major questions, obviously, is what are your health priorities, or what are the
Mm-hmm.
things that essentially, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
like any doctor, you come in, what can I do for you? What are your issues?
Yeah.
Um, and fatigue and low energy would be number one, and like that basically across the board. And that kind of goes along with the term burnout. A lot of people that I work with would say they're feeling burnt out or they're worried about burning out because of that imbalance between work, play, family. That's a big issue. But
Hmm.
anxiety is definitely one of the top three things that comes into my office in terms of primary concerns. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm really hesitant at even the term mental health. And I mean, I don't know that there's a better term. And, I think we're all in agreement that we need more attention and focus and discussion and frank discussion about mental health. And that level
Hmm.
of awareness is improving slowly, but we're still not doing enough for that. I think, resilience is mental and emotional, but it is also much more than mental and emotional as well. And you talked earlier, Rachel, about that sort of interplay with mind body mind gut for that matter as well, and that's a huge way that as naturopathic doctors I think that's a big part of how we're trained is to be thinking about how do we how do we address and help to manage um, mental emotional feelings and senses and experiences through stabilization of inflammation, particularly in the gut and in the body more
Yeah.
system as well. There's clear connections there. Like that's not even like a belief anymore. Like mind gut and mind body connections, like that's just a fact. Like we know how those things interplay. I mean,
Hmm.
just talking about neurotransmitters is probably the easiest way to talk about that and
Yeah.
serotonin.
Yes.
Yes.
But there's so many different ways that our hormones play a role in kind of connecting that. So it's not a this isn't a this isn't woo medicine. This is like at this point more than fact.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, that's really well said. And, I think a lot of people are going to benefit from the different scopes of discussion and topics that are covered in this dialogue today, because it's going to give them the understanding of it's such a fully dimensional practice of self-care and development, and then how the breadth of naturopathic medicine is able to provide people the solutions potentially to things that maybe they haven't known there's a solution to before they actually embark on their journey with that form of medicine. It's really important.
And one quick thing to add to that, and to what Jason's saying too, the amount of people, and we've had a few people on the show that have talked about this in the past, where for years they had some chronic pain or they had something no one could diagnose. They didn't know what the fuck was wrong with them, whatever it may be.
Hmm.
And then when they got down to the real nitty gritty, it was something so deeply ingrained emotionally, some connection with, the mind. And then once that was kind of figured out, then those types of, and that's not for everybody, of course, but it's just been more commonly seen, I guess, lately is what I'm noticing from people, once they realize that it's so much deeper than,
Yeah, I think more people are more willing to accept, explore, and address the fact that, you know, those traumas that we've gone through in our lives that may or may not be as conscious or at the forefront of our minds, that they may very well have played a role. I think that, you know, historically it's not been appropriate to talk about those things, and those are things that we, you know, repress and shove down. And because we are having more of these discussions around mental health, and it's starting to be more okay, and there are more safe places and people to talk to about these kinds of things, people are more willing to put in the work and to explore and to tackle that head on. And that's why I think we're here about it. So it's a positive thing, but it's also a difficult transition and process for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's not something that, you know, that every, like, that's not a one person team that has to help to address that. That's, you know, a conventional approach, and there's usually multiple people that are involved there. It's why at my clinic, I've got clinical counselors, I've got nutritionists, naturopathic doctors with different focuses as well. And obviously, you know, body work and stuff like that too, because there's different tools that we can bring and to help to manage a case. And that's why I think many naturopathic doctors you're going to find will work in a fairly interdisciplinary clinic or setting, or at least have those resources to be able to refer out to.
I love that.
And so one thing that we love to do on our podcast is just to get to know our guests from all walks of their life, how they got to where they are now, even from like the first day they were born. And so I kind of wanted to kind of take a trip down memory lane for you, and kind of a little bit more so about, you know, what was it like for you growing up in your childhood? How did that come about? And then you kind of touched on your adolescence a little bit as a gamer, which I'm a major gamer as well. But I'd be curious to know, for those that are new to listening to the show that maybe don't know this part about you, what would you like to share in this dialogue about your past and how it helped influence your current life?
Ask me that on a podcast. That's a deep question, guys.
We go deep.
I guess where I'd start is just, you know, my dad is an engineer by training. My dad actually had, got 2 degrees. He actually studied biology first and then went back for chemistry or chemical engineering. So, you know, as an engineer, you know, very much like that's like, how does stuff work, right? Like that's what he likes to figure out. And so there's sort of that part of my upbringing, and understanding a little bit about, you know, what he did and how he had to think about his projects. And he was also a very entrepreneurial guy. In fact, my whole family, the men on my in my family, you know, my mentors, like my dad and my grandfather before him, they all owned and ran their own businesses at some point in their lives. So that is kind of pervasive too. But you know, as an engineer, a son of an engineer, and then my mother was a teacher. And so again, getting back to that teaching, coaching side of things, right? So when you think of those 2 things, like engineer, how do things work? And teacher, like, how do I get the most out of people? Like that coming together, it's like, oh, that's why I became a naturopathic doctor, because those were the values and the principles that were instilled in me growing up. So to me, that makes a lot of sense. I had a really athletic background. So, you know, I was playing competitive soccer from the age of 9 years old. And I played varsity volleyball in university, and then coached volleyball as I was finishing university. So for me, there was always a coaching, teaching aspect in things. So that's kind of how I, you know, developed into the sort of developed the tools that have allowed me to do the things that I'm doing now as a naturopathic doctor. Yeah, I guess that's sort of like the history and the past of my childhood to a certain extent, I guess, that you know, brought me to where I'm at now. Yeah. What else do you want to know?
Well, I mean, we could ask anything, you know, but I think it's neat to know in terms of just, you know, what were some of the aha moments that kind of led you to where you are today, which is exactly what you expressed about. And I mean, that's really all that is relevant in terms of the dialogue as well. Anything else you want to share or talk about is completely up to your consent and control. But I think that pretty much summarized enough from what we were trying to get at.
That, like, and Jason already said this in the beginning of the podcast, but I think some people might think, oh, the reason why someone goes into something is because some super traumatic thing happened to them and they found an alternative way of dealing with it, and then they decided to go naturopathic medicine. Or if you're a psychologist or a therapist, like, you know, you dealt with a lot of shit in your life and you decided that you wanted to bring what you've learned to, your career, your path, but that's not always the case, right? And it's just funny how a lot of us think that way, I think sometimes.
Yeah. Now I think about I got something for you, Hero. Um, I don't know why this memory ever popped up later on, and I never remembered this when I was actually in med school for naturopathic medicine. But when I was a really young kid, like I have distinct memories of grabbing like spices and herbs from the kitchen and taking them out to the sidewalk with a pot of water and like with grass and dandelions and soil and herbs and stuff like that. Like I can smell it as I'm talking about it. Like I would mix potions, which I find really hilarious these days. And tinctures in naturopathic medicine are one way that we can deliver herbs in an effective way. Why I think that's funny is because, and this is literally, it's actually on my screen right now. I'm working on an Instagram post, and it literally is a quote that I say a lot, and that is that I am not your tree hugging, Birkenstock wearing, potion mixing, crystal reading naturopathic doctor. I'm the guy with the scientific study and the research to back this up and an understanding of how your body works, to help you make those decisions. So I wouldn't say that I brew potions in a cauldron or anything like that, or even really mix a lot of potions. I do use tinctures sometimes. But that is one thing that I don't know when I remembered that, but that was like a couple of years ago. I had this realization. I think it was a smell. I think I smelt something
Yeah.
similar. And I'm like, holy crap! I was meant to be a naturopathic doctor since I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a witch doctor since I was.
I love,
Oh, love that.
did you grow up in Vancouver or in BC?
No, well, I was born here in the Lower Mainland, but my family got transplanted out in the Toronto area when I was really young. So my dad worked for Gulf Canada, and then which got taken over by Petro Canada at the time. And so we moved out to the Toronto suburbs of Toronto. I really grew up out there for most of my adolescent life, anyway. I started my undergrad and played varsity volleyball at University of Waterloo, but ended
Okay.
up finishing grad out in Nova Scotia at St. Max. Back to Toronto for med school, met my now wife, and we moved back to Vancouver in 2009. So I've kind of gone there and back again across the country.
Wow.
Amazing, amazing. And then your wife is from Vancouver. Then I'm taking it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
She
that
was
makes sense.
born and raised in Portland.
There you
Yeah.
go. That makes sense for sure. It's been so great to have you on our show on the platform, just in a way to kind of bridge the gap between, again, a healing practice and also an actual form of doctoral profession, and bringing that to people that, especially amidst the pandemic, before and also during, but also after. I'm really curious to know what your thoughts or insights are from yourself or from colleagues in a, however you want to put it. What are your thoughts on people that would be coming in recovery from COVID? What their needs could be, what you think you might see more trends of, maybe things that might be less than they are currently. I'm sure that must have crossed your mind a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, coming as we are hopefully coming out of this third wave, and back to what a lot of people are referring to some form of normalcy. I think the important thing to recognize for everybody is that we're not getting back to normal, and we've said like everyone's saying like the new normal, but I don't think people really recognize that that's exactly what this is. Like, I don't know how much I don't know mask wearing is going to be pervasive as we move out of this, and there are
Yeah.
fewer. But when you look around the world at mask wearing, like that's something that is done out of respect, and that is a thoughtful thing to do when people aren't feeling at their best or just feel like they feel more comfortable with not exposing themselves to other people. So I think that I guess I would say I'm just watching with a lot of curiosity to see how people around the world and in different areas, we're kind of looking at the states right now as they open up to see the challenges that they're having. And, we obviously, I think as Canadians, we would like to think that we are fairly different from Americans, but we're also very similar to Americans as well.
Mm.
So, yeah, I'm just very interested to see. But I think the big thing that we need to all realize is that some of these things that have changed in this pandemic and that we have adopted, like doing more podcasts and more video and meeting people online and having coffee meetings, like
Mm-hmm.
why would we go to a coffee shop anymore? Like we can have coffee with people across the country, across the world,
Mm-hmm.
talk with them and develop conversations and relationships overseas so much more easily now. Whereas a year and a half ago, it probably wasn't something that really came to mind as much, right?
Yeah.
We can do, from an environmental and a sustainability standpoint, in terms of air travel, especially, like we have figured out how to do conferences and meetings online instead of spending ridiculous amounts of money and fossil fuels to burn up our atmosphere. Like
Mm-hmm.
these are all things that I think companies will save money on as they're trying to mitigate those travel costs.
Yeah.
So I think that there are a lot of things that are not going to change back entirely. The pendulum's not going to swing completely back. We're not getting back to what we thought of as normal a year and a half ago. There's going to be a lot of legacy, and I think as long as the legacy for this pandemic is more about how we came together and did the best things that we can think of for each other and
Mm-hmm.
to be thinking about this as being in this together, that needs to be the legacy for what COVID-19 leaves us with. It's not, all the shitty stuff that we can think about. And I mean, we want to respect that we've lost a lot of people, and a lot of
Hmm.
family. And I think many Canadians will have been touched by some form of coronavirus story in their family or or group of friends.
Hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
we also need to recognize what's important. So that's what we need to be thinking about coming out of coronavirus.
Well
Yeah.
said. Well
Very.
said.
Whether or not we come out of that, I mean, it's looking like coronavirus will likely become more endemic and it's something that will likely pop up, during flu season. We're not just going to be worried about the flu and the cold. COVID will be a third, prong to that trident.
I
And that's what it's looking like right now. We'll see what happens in the coming months.
I kind of agree with that as well. It's interesting to think how not that long ago we used to go to work deathly ill because we were afraid of being, either not fired but just reprimanded for
Mhm.
missing work. And I feel like now people have been able to, yes, it's been very stressful, but people have been able to heal and have time to actually, like, if they are ill or they do feel a bit under the weather, it's like it's accepted now
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
take care of.
That's part of that's like the like at an organizational level. I talked about like coaching at the organizational and corporate level. Like that's exactly the kind of thing that we need to recognize at that higher level, like C-suite level, is if we give our employees the opportunity to be at their best and to rest and to recover and to be comfortable with the environment that they're working in, we're going to get a lot more out of them.
Yep.
And where I think, historically corporations are like, work harder, work more, work longer hours. We need more out of you. We need to make more money from the money that we're spending on you as an employee. And now we're recognizing if you want to do that, you've got to give that person, like, figure out how to get the most out of that person. And it's not always just, whipping their ass into gear. It's giving
Oh
them the
yeah.
space, the best version of themselves.
Yeah. Because imagine,
The
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, the other thing I just wanted to mention is, the three of us, we are in Vancouver, in Canada, and in BC, and things aren't awesome for us right now as we're still kind of coming out of this third wave in BC. But when I look at my friends and family and colleagues in Ontario, as especially as a dad with young kids, they've been in full lockdown since Christmas in Ontario, in most areas. And for young parents with kids, like they're having to homeschool their kids because schools have been closed. Like I can't imagine what that would have been like. That is important for I think for British Columbians to recognize that when we're talking about like, hey, this hasn't been so bad in some ways. Like, man, in Ontario in particular, in Alberta, like it's a tougher story in some ways
Yep.
there too. I had to make sure that I said that.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important to acknowledge, and we've been very lucky here in BC, despite the issues that have come up
Not
for a lot of people. Yeah, of course, but we've been very, very blessed. Even though there are certain lifestyles that people live that are greatly compromised, or my profession 100% compromised, and having to basically throw a plot twist for the last year and a half. But there are a lot of people that are working in industries that are pandemic proof, in the sense that they can still maintain the same workload that they need to financially be stable or to provide a structure in their lives. And there are some people, certain industries that really have suffered and have caused people in show business and entertainment, depending where in that industry, people that are yoga, fitness, or indoor group facilitators of any kind. Those types of industries have really been acutely affected,
Mhm.
and even in BC. So it's really frustrating. And as you said, we're very lucky that we at least have enough safety net around us if we're practicing common sense, which a lot of people are not still. I'm just going to say that. It provides us a stability to actually still function, and also this support our neighbors that need more support and that we can give them to.
yeah,
Mhm.
So
absolutely. Well, Jason, thank you so much for the conversation. Yeah, I really think it's helpful talking about these things, and also just I like how we didn't really touch on super controversial topics right now, because there are a lot right now when it comes to holistic views and vaccines and all those kinds of things, and I don't really think it needs to be said. So I'm glad that we didn't really talk about it. Yeah, so thank you for your insight. And one last question that we like to ask. I don't know if you're prepared for this. It doesn't matter if you are, because it's kind of maybe better that you're not. If you were a certain juice, because we are the Getting Juicy podcast,
Mm.
what would you be and why? And juice is a very broad term because it can be like anything.
Yeah. So, let me. I'll give you an interesting answer. And some people vilify me for this, and they'll be like, "This was an awesome podcast," and then he said this. Um, I'm actually not a big fan of juice. Like as a naturopathic doctor, like the juicing fad, and I'm calling it a fad because like the same people who are like juicing, they're like whole foods, whole foods, whole foods, and I'm like, juicing's not whole foods, man. You're literally taking all the sugar and
Yeah,
carbohydrates out of a vegetable or a fruit, and you're taking away all the fiber, and you're taking away some of, not all of, the other nutrients that are part of that whole food that synergize and balance that food. Anyways, that's my rant.
it's true.
That being said, if I had to choose one, blueberries, blueberry juice, high in antioxidants, gives you tons of energy, helps prevent a whole bunch of bad shit from happening. Awesome for your eyes. Low glycemic index, but again, if you're juicing it, then that probably changes a lot. so, uh,
Love it.
so that's my actual answer to your question. If I'm being a jackass about it, then I'll say no juices, smoothies only. And so I'll have a blueberry smoothie.
And
love it.
it's funny that you really specify that, because even when I say juice, it's funny. Like I drink juice and I actually just blend everything. I don't juice it. I just drink smoothies actually. So, and I think of almost, I guess a smoothie isn't really juice, but in my mind it almost is. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, and if you hate me for that, I don't care. 'Cause
Whatever, who cares? It's such a simple
that's,
topic.
that's how science works.
I
Yeah.
love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jay. Appreciate it. Definitely we'll see you soon in the professional setting. And yeah, and Rachel does all the post production like an angel, and she'll have this out within the next week.
That's
You
my
guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Had a lot of fun.
Good. I'm very glad.
take good
Okay,
care.
see you.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.